Chapter 7. The Investigations. How does an accused start an investigation knowing that the state has a couple of months head start? How effective could it be after profuse damaging publicity, charges made with false substantiation, has created so negative an impression of the public mind? Most of the publicity involved stories deliberately leaked by law enforcement officials in violation of the law. My lawyers were hampered by a rhythm set by the state attorney's office. A chess game wherein a player cannot plan or make a move until the adversary makes his. Amirani was slow in getting started and having to wait for the state to tender statements of witnesses and to show what evidence it had under the motions of discovery. The state would continue this delaying game until it was forced by the court to make its move. In a case of this magnitude, the problems become tenfold. Every person who made a relevant claim had to be interviewed, and a statement taken from each and evaluated to determine how much of the story, as printed, was fact, and how much was fabricated by the reporter to make it more interesting. Many times, paragraph after paragraph was created from only one sentence of data, the remainder being fantasy, allegation, innuendo. Amirani checked with me once or twice a week, asking if this or that scrap had any foundation. If I had ever worked in DePage or out of Calumet City, if I knew this guy or the one who said that about me. We spent long hours sorting fact from fiction in every media story. I finally told Sam, if all these stories were true, I'd have to spend 24 hours a day doing nothing but this stuff. He looked at me and smiled for a change. Yeah, you're right. But I still have to ask you, because we're not sure which of these people the state intends to use as witnesses to try to prove that you're that type. I was beginning to believe that there had to be 2 or 3 of me out there. No one person could have done all the things that were attributed to me. Some of the tales told happened simultaneously. This extensive checking, investigating, was just one of the many difficulties Amirani and Stevens faced in the beginning. Sam sorely needed help, someone with another train of thinking, someone with new questions, more expertise, more cunning in criminal trials. He came to realize this need after a while. His solution was Bob Motta, another untested attorney from the public defender's office. Bob was like Sam, in that neither had been in private practice, getting their bones working for the county since graduation from law school. But in January, when Sam introduced us, I didn't worry about that, not realizing that I was in so much trouble. I honestly felt that the state's case against me wouldn't wash. The evidence was circumstantial, insubstantial. The charges could not stand up under the questioning, explanation, the clearing testimony that I felt would certainly emerge during the course of a trial. With the state's tunnel vision of my guilt, they are trying to put a noose around my neck. They had closed their eyes to any other suspect. Like an inept tailor, they patterned the case to fit me, but it would prove to be a size 48 suit draped on a size 38 frame. But the public, and its microcosm, the jury, had the same tunnel vision. I was guilty before the trial started. In January, another investigation was conducted, apart from the state or the defense. The Secret Service for the White House interrogated me after the Chicago Tribune on January 21st published a picture of me standing beside Rosalind Carter, the president's wife. She had autographed the picture. To John Gacy, best wishes, Rosalind Carter. The occasion was the reception of guests following the Polish Constitution Day parade and ceremonies. I had been the parade director for 3 years and coordinated the First Lady's movements from the time she arrived in Chicago until the end of the reception. The autographed picture was her way of expressing her appreciation. But the Secret Service was embarrassed that an ex-con could have gotten so close to their ward. I had become a person from the man who served 14 months in an Iowa jail, but that didn't lessen their embarrassment. Their purpose in visiting me in the Cook County Jail was only to caution me not to give any statement to any news service. Washington could handle the rest. Of course, by that time I could understand that they're not wanting me to come within a light year of the newsmakers. The picture had been in my home, prominently displayed since I had received it in September 1978. I had earned it, and I was proud of it. The police stole it and sold it. In the first 3 months, not much of our investigation was done. Sam was relying on what I was giving him, studying what the state had intended to use, comparing it with my versions. I was able to help by disproving the media stories, telling him where I was at the time the stories were written as taking place. Otherwise, not much ground was being covered. Sam and Bob were having to rely on friends in the public defender's office to track down the accusations. Several investigators they knew were volunteering their spare time, but were armed with sticks and stones in a modern-day battle. Our efforts were a far cry from what the state attorney's office could do with an army of police and special investigators, digging up everything they could find about me, and perverting it when it didn't fit the image they were palming off on the public. Finally, in April, Amirani, with limited funds, hired 2 investigators to work for him. There was enough research to be done, contradictions to be sorted, indefinite gray zones in the ledgers of law to be examined and re-examined. Enough work to tie up an entire legal firm. Don Bell and Mark White, not their real names, semi-private investigators, met with Amirani daily for assignments. They went out into the field to scrape the report back with scraps and bits of the puzzle which would vindicate me if it could be completed. Amirani introduced us. If the person they were checking out was known to me, I was to give them as much information as I could on his background, tell them where he might be found and who he associated with. In the beginning, we went through some of the old employees who had keys to the house at one time or another, and who, after being fired or quitting, would want to get even with me. Since I hadn't done much of the hiring or firing, there were only a few that I could name for them. Many of the leads and much of the information they were getting pointed to just 2 young men. The names of Mike Rossi and David Cram kept popping up. So they put tails on these 2. Patterns began to develop from one of the 2 more than the other. But Amirani terminated the watch, saying that they were wasting time on it. It was my thinking that they were doing the right thing, showing that what I was saying would hold up, that recent leads had pointed to others rather than to me. He said he wasn't interested in proving a conspiracy or that others may have committed the murders. That would be no help in the insanity defense, which is what he had decided to proceed with. At times, I didn't know whose side he was on. I always thought a attorney was supposed to defend you, to try to prove you innocent. Amirani wanted to build a case on the basis that if I had done it, I was insane at the time. I told him he was insane. How the hell are you going to get 12 people to believe that I was insane 33 times and then went back to running a successful business? Hell, I couldn't believe that myself. He always gave me the same answer. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. This is the best way. We can win. While my ignorance is no excuse, I can see now that I should have been more insistent that things be done my way. I had told him time and time again that it was impossible for me to have killed all those people and not known something about it. He knew that I knew that others were responsible. Others who had the motives, the opportunity, the keys. When he tried to explain his defense strategy to me, he seemed to expect my gratitude. My suggestions were in vain. I was spouting pure common sense. My intuitions were superior to his, but he was obsessed with the idea that this was his case, and he was going to do it his way. He was adamant, stubborn. If someone disagreed with him, he got rid of him. Maybe that was one reason Stevens didn't last long. Finally, even Mata couldn't understand or support Amirani the way he wanted, and wrangling started. While the state was working harmoniously, there was discord in my camp. In July, he let the investigators go for lack of money and because of his disagreement with the direction they were taking. We had many arguments over that because I felt that they were my solitary hope for what we would sorely need in the trial. From July to November, just the two attorneys worked on my case, with some occasional help from Amirani's friend, an investigator dubbed Nick the Greek. All the time, the state, with its army of muckrackers, was plowing along, manufacturing whatever they needed, withholding from us whatever they could until the last minute. Later, I realized how chintzy their case was. Thus the reason for their clouding their progress. Amirani never was able to exert the legal force necessary to pressure them to comply with his demand for discovery of their information. There was no doubt that if we'd had more money in hand, a more competent defense could have been constructed. The state had all the money they needed, and by blocking my assets for Amirani's use, they had tied his hands. On November 7th, 1979, Amirani and Mata were appointed my counsel by the court with full back pay for the work they had done. In a separate order, Judge Garippo read, "The Public Defender's Office is appointed for limited purpose of providing investigatory support in the above entitled case, to be assigned to attorneys Amirani and Mata." Now, for the first time, a real team could start a full-scale investigation for me. Amirani told me that the order meant that he would have some 45 investigators assigned to him to work on the defense and that they would be accountable only to him. It was a needed dose of optimism. I was looking upward even though we were 11 months behind the state in our investigation. With Judge Garippo pushing for trial, we had to work at top speed. We had much ground to cover. We needed to talk to all the people the state had, And we were also faced with the task of interviewing 700 potential witnesses for the defense. People who had known me or had come into contact with me over the last 6 years. During the time I was held at the Cook County Jail, I was isolated. A jail within a jail. I was protected from communication with anyone, including my family and friends. Emma Rani wanted to be sure that no one except for his staff could get any information from me. But by the same token, I had no way to get out any plea for help when I disagreed with Emma Rani. He was the only one who could approve people to be added to my visiting list. He brought the group leaders in to meet me so that I would know and remember who to talk to. They came from time to time to explain what they had found and get information from me, where they might find certain people they needed to talk to, what contact I'd had with them, and general information. Again, some of these investigators kept turning up things that pointed to someone else, or that could establish contact between certain employees of PDM and certain victims. And Rani wasn't interested in this information because it didn't fit precisely into the defense he was shaping. Some of our investigators were assigned to check out all the state's witness list, rehashing their statements, and then asking questions to see if they could get a different slant on the information. Another team interviewed prospective witnesses for the defense to see what information they had and determining its strength or validity. A third group was to check on people who claimed to have been attacked or approached by me. And many of those it was possible to learn that they could not have taken place. My records could account for my time and whereabouts when the attacks were supposed to have happened. For an example, one story claimed that while I was remodeling a warehouse building in Wheaton, Illinois, I had propositioned a subcontractor and then made forceful advances. The investigator found that neither PDM nor I had ever worked on a warehouse in Wheaton. During the time the story had me in Wheaton, I was actually in Brooklyn, New York for 2 weeks. Time and again, stories just as inaccurate as that made news. There were no preventative measures we could take. We had to check it all. It seemed a waste of time and manpower, but it had to be done. We couldn't afford to miss talking to someone who might have information quite different from that recorded by the state. But the state's investigators got the gravy part of the probe. They traveled to all the out-of-town and out-of-state places they wanted to check. Waterloo, Iowa, Clearwater, Florida, from Little Rock to Las Vegas. The people they talked to in those places hadn't seen me in years. What they could say about me, which could be of any use to the state, was beyond me. I guess it was a way for the investigators to enjoy spending the taxpayers' money, or else they were grasping at straws. 2 areas of their investigation must have given them problems. One was having to check out all the phony news stories. The other was taking and evaluating statements of my current and former employees when they could be found. After the state talked to these men, it seemed that they were, in effect, told to disappear, being warned that if they spoke to our people, they might be netted into the trial hearings or even the trial itself. There were also numerous statements of subcontractors who had worked for PDM. Most of these amounted to nothing more than a brief statement that John Gacy was a firm but fair man to deal with, that his word as his bond when it came to following through on a job and getting payments to them for their work. We had little more than 2.5 months to do what the state had 13 months to do. Every insidious effort was made to stop us from getting that job done. Pertinent information was regularly withheld. Delays became status quo. We operated in semi-darkness. But my darkness was more profound than the rest of the team. I just couldn't understand Emirani's direction